Hey everyone, it's Susan, and I have something exciting to share with you all. Over the next few months, I'm going to be releasing some special episodes that were originally part of the Divorce and Beyond membership community. Since I started the community, my career has kind of exploded, and I've gotten just so crazy busy that I had to discontinue the membership. The content is still so valuable that I didn't want it to go to waste. Most of these episodes are solo with just me, but they're packed with insights on specific topics that you have asked for over the years. They'll be marked as members only, but remember, they're brand new to you, and since they were membership episodes, you may notice a few other differences. Things like there's no ad break in the middle, there are fewer ads, if any ads at all, and many of the episodes have free downloadables that accompany them. So make sure to check the show notes for links if I reference something in the episode. So tune in and get your membership experience and let me know if there's any new topics you'd like to hear me cover. Now let's listen in on today's membership episode.
Hello and welcome to this Divorce and Beyond podcast member-only episode. In this specially curated episode, I've cut out all the ads, the sponsor messages, and the breaks just for you. I've left just the actual information, the expert advice, and the action tips that my experts and I bring to the table to help you on your journey. My goal with your membership is to get you past your divorce and onto a happy, healthy, and whole future as you move through divorce and beyond. Hello, members. It's Susan, and I'm here with your exclusive Divorce and Beyond members only bonus podcast episode. And today I want to talk to you about the house, right? This is one of the big important topics in almost any divorce when a couple owns a home, but also just that issue of what to do about the residence that you're sharing, be it a rental or a home you own. So the topic is moving out. When should you leave, and other house issues in divorce? So, this is something that comes up for people really early on in the divorce process. And a really common question that we hear as divorce attorneys is, can I move out? Or can I force my spouse to move out? Those are two separate questions, a lot of different considerations. So let's start with the first, right? Let's put some order to this. What are the risks if you decide to move out of a shared property, whether that be an owned home or a rented home? So there are some risks if you move out. One thing that I've often seen happen is things start to disappear. So valuables within the home, if you do not get all of those things out when you move, you may go back to find that they are not there anymore or have been moved to a separate location, or as happened in one of my cases, several items were sold and the money pocketed by the other party. The other thing you need to remember is that in the home, many times you have your important documents and documentation. And so when you leave, if you leave behind that all-important file folder of, the deeds and the financial account statements and, birth certificates, passports, all of that important information, you are leaving it in the control of the other party, which can be dangerous. Other things that I've seen happen are people get angry when they are getting divorced, and sometimes they will take that out on our belongings. So I have seen things be destroyed, clothing, objects that have sentimental value for you, a gift from a family member or your, high school yearbook, whatever might be of importance to you. Again, it goes kind of to that, if you aren't able to remove everything from the house immediately, you kind of put yourself in that position of where you leave in the house is at the mercy of the person who's still there. Another very practical issue that comes out if you're going to move out of the property is now we have two households possibly that need to be paid for. That's a common occurrence, right? When the divorce happens, people who are divorced rarely continue to live together, although I've had it. But you do have to consider, is this something that's affordable, right? Is this something that we can maintain the house as well, that we were sharing together? And can I rent or buy something separate for myself? Or is there somewhere else that I can stay? There's also something that I want to talk about around the kids, because one, you can get into situations where, well, if you leave, are the children staying in the home or are they moving out with you? Is that, how are you going to handle parenting time now between those two households? If you move out, leaving the children in the marital residence, make sure that you have a set understanding, hopefully, about when you will see the children and how they will flow. This can really get bogged down, and it's not a situation that you want to continue for any extended period of time. It can have an alienating effect when you leave, again, control of when you get to see your children or access to your children in the hands of someone who is possibly angry, vindictive, or not feeling particularly cooperative or respectful. Sometimes it's a very good idea to have a written understanding between the two of you as to how that's going to work. Now, those are all risks if you decide to move out. Some of the risks if you stay are certainly domestic violence. One thing that we see very often, unfortunately, is even a situation that was not violent, either emotionally, verbally, or physically abusive, can start to escalate during the divorce process. And that can be a truly worrisome, something that you need to keep at the top of your potential, list of things to be aware of. And, it can be very hard, especially, as we've all gone through COVID, it was really hard for people to get away from each other. And so those negative environments would continue. So certainly domestic violence working its way into the mix is a potential risk. Another potential risk is that as people go through divorce, unfortunately, right, you're going to now start this very sometimes disruptive and hurtful process of dividing up your things, deciding who gets what. It's difficult. Listen to any of my other episodes, right? And we're going to talk about that. But again, much like the domestic violence, the rise of domestic violence, it also can just escalate in toxicity between the two parties. And this can play itself out in elevating levels of conflict. And one thing I know you've heard me say before is it's not divorce that harms your children. It's the level of conflict between parents that harms children. And certainly a toxic environment where the two of you are living under the same roof under trying circumstances with sometimes challenged skills to deal with that can create a toxic environment, not just for you, but for your children. And finally, one of the realities of divorce is that you are going to start establishing separate identities from each other, yet that's very hard to do when you have no privacy. And you have very little privacy when you're sharing a roof. You can certainly make arrangements where one of you is occupying one bedroom and the other occupying another, but you're in the same house. There's a great lack of privacy. And, as you work through the emotional content of divorce, the financial aspects of the divorce, and also trying to help your children through this, not having that privacy to go through your process without the other person there can be really difficult. So you need to do, when deciding whether you want to move out, you need to do sort of a pro and con approach. Now, I also want to add in is if you are in litigation or you have an attorney or you're working with a mediator, these are definitely things to be talking about with your practitioner because there may be some legal aspects to moving out. But one of the things that people will ask me all the time is, if I move out, do I lose any claim I might have to the house? And I would say from a legal perspective, if you are an owner of the home, meaning your name is on the title, then no, just by reason of not living there, you could own a property that you rent out to other people. You still have a legal interest in that home by way of ownership. So you do not lose that by moving out. If the home is solely in your spouse's name, but it is marital property, meaning it was acquired usually during the time of the marriage or with marital funds, then just by reason of moving out, again, you do not lose that interest. If it is separate property of your spouse and you move out, you may lose your claim to the house because likely your claim is that of a tenant or someone who lived there. And if you abandon that claim, you may not have the right to then move back in. That may or may not be significant to you. If you're moving out and intending it to be permanent, that may not matter. But again, those are legal issues to be discussed with your attorney or reviewed in mediation with your mediator, and hopefully to come to an agreement. Now, the other thing around the house, if one of you moves out, is how are the bills of that property going to be paid? Especially significant when you are on title or you're on the mortgage to the property. So if you move out, but your name's on the mortgage, you certainly want to make sure that mortgage is getting paid. It affects your credit and it affects your equity interest in the property. But also maintenance, right? How is maintenance going to be? That you want the property to be maintained. You want the property to be properly insured. You want the utilities to be kept up. You want repairs to be taken care of because it all affects your ownership interest. So you need to have some understanding of how that is going to be handled. Again, wonderful fodder for sitting down with your mediator to talk about these issues if you're in mediation, or ask your attorney to negotiate an interim agreement if you're planning on moving out on how these things will be handled. Now, another legal question that we get often centers around this word abandonment. Am I going to be considered at fault for the breakdown of our marriage because I abandoned my spouse by moving out? So people have heard this word, fault grounds for divorce and abandonment. So understand what abandonment is. Most states define under the terms of fault basis for divorce, abandonment as financially abandoning a spouse, leaving them without resources and support in such a fashion that they are essentially on their own. And there's usually a time consideration to that. Most states, it's along the lines of abandoned without support for 1 year or more, something along those lines. So just moving out of the house that you share together, or the home that you share together, is not considered abandonment. In fact, there's no requirement that married people live together. And so, you'll see married people who live in separate residence on occasion. There's nothing wrong with that. There's also a consideration at law that there's something called constructive abandonment, and that is something that's alleged against a party who basically drives the other party out of the home, again, because of violence, abuse, toxic environment. Fault grounds don't come up that often, so it's not really relevant, but I do get questions about it quite a lot, so I want to make sure that I touch on that. Now, I've mentioned the kids, but I want to go a little deeper into that because the kids are really one of your biggest considerations if you're planning on separating households. And understand that if you've filed for divorce There may already be something called automatic temporary restraining orders or automatic orders of the court that went into place that have rules about what you're allowed to do about changing the residence of the children. So again, be sure to check any paperwork and check with your attorney or your mediator about anything you are planning to do that would relocate the children's residence. The other thing to, again, consider is what sort of parenting plan you are going to put in place when one of you moves out. Because if there's nothing in place, then there's no structure and there's nothing you can rely on, either one of you as parents. You both have equal rights to your children. And this is great if you're cooperative, but if you are not, or if something happens and what was cooperative becomes not so cooperative, the children are often weaponized. And without some sort of set plan, and hopefully as a court order or an agreement that you both agree you're going to live by, it can be really tricky to move out without your children and then try to set up a parenting plan. Now, the biggest question, and the one that I always get, every divorce attorney has heard this in a million different ways. How do I kick my spouse out? I want him out. I want her out. I want them to leave. I don't want them to live here anymore. I want to stay here with the kids. So this is problematic. This can be difficult. There are a few different ways to do this. Now, the number one thing I want to say is if there is domestic violence happening, and you are in imminent fear of imminent harm, physical harm from your spouse, it is extremely likely that upon request through the proper channels, requesting a restraining order through the court, you would likely get one if you can reach that level of giving the judge grounds for why you fear imminent physical harm from your spouse. That will remove them immediately from the property. But that is a severe and very high bar to reach, to bar someone from their property. And so you have to have, very specific reasons why you're in fear of physical harm. Most states do not include in that mental or emotional abuse. And so that can be difficult if your spouse is, emotionally abusive. Some states are starting to expand their definition, but most do not. Again, you can check with most courthouses, have a victim's advocate who can help you with that paperwork. But if you are just in a situation where you're like, we're getting a divorce, I do not want to live with this person anymore, and it just makes to me a lot more sense that they leave and I stay, you usually have to file something called a motion for exclusive possession of the marital residence. And this can be whether it's rented or owned. And you have to have really good reasons why you want the court to order the other spouse to leave the property and let you have it exclusively. And this is an even higher bar. Commonly used reasons that people will allege in their pleadings would be the situation in the household is so toxic that it's an unhealthy environment for the children, not for the parents, but for the children, that there has been domestic violence in the past and it's not a positive situation for the children, again, to be there with the abusive parent still in the home, or, that it's financially reasonable. This is really one of the things that comes up and is usually the thing that prevents a judge from ordering someone out of the house, because if it's easy, if there's tons of money or a second home or family members nearby or something like that, then there's somewhere for that person to go. But often, it's a financial strain to establish a second household. And so there needs to be some sort of plan usually about what can happen for that other party who's being asked to move out. So exclusive possession is different in every jurisdiction. Know that it can be requested. It's most often, at least in my experience, requested on behalf of the children. And it's a difficult one to get granted. It's more often arrived at by agreement that one of the parties will agree to leave under certain circumstances, and it usually means that you have to make some concessions. And again, you will also want to come to agreements if you're doing this by court order about the kids, about how bills are going to get paid, et cetera, et cetera. Now, there are several questions that I receive also about changing the locks. And, this is something that I will say many people just do on a self-help basis. And we usually as attorneys find out about it after the fact, after our client or the other party has gone and changed all the locks on the property. And I would say in general, this is not something that you can do without a court order. Most states in those ATROs, the automatic temporary restraining orders or automatic court orders that go into place when you file for divorce, many of them say that if the two of you are living together at that time, neither party can change the locks. In fact, in Connecticut, that's specifically in the orders where I practice there. So this is another area where you just cannot willy-nilly take self-help and go and change all the locks. Now, here's another practical aspect. It's expensive to change the locks on a house, $500, $600, $700 on an average home, a lot more on a big home. And if you are both on title and you did not have a court order allowing you to do this, and your spouse is on title to the property, there's nothing to stop them from just bringing another locksmith or even the same one over and changing the locks. And now you're the one who's locked out. So again, that self-help is usually frowned upon by the court. Now, there are a lot more issues around the house when it's owned. Who gets to buy the other one out? Who gets to keep it? All of these things, how the property is going to be handled. But I'm going to do that in a separate podcast episode because there's a lot of issues that I want to talk about that. It's things that you need to be aware of in keeping the house or deciding what you're going to do with the house. But these all are things to take into consideration because, honestly, as you're going through divorce, that idea of starting to live separately is always usually very attractive, but it's a complicated issue, something that you definitely want to consider and think through unless it's an emergency situation and you need to do something to protect your safety, the safety of your children or your pets, and something to discuss either with your counsel or in mediation with your spouse so that you can have agreements around it. So I hope you found this helpful. Stay tuned for the next episode, which will be about what to do with the house when you jointly own it or when you own it in a divorce. So I hope you've been enjoying your members only community membership, and I'll see you soon. Thank you for joining me on today's Divorce and Beyond podcast member-only episode. I hope you found some information and inspiration that helps you on your journey. If you have any questions, you can feel free to ask me on the exclusive members-only Ask Susan Anything page. You'll find a link to the page where you can ask questions as well as all of your other membership benefits on the website at divorceandbeyondpod.com.